Lego Star Wars The Skywalker Saga is a game that needs absolutely no introduction. I mean, Lego Star Wars has become one of those things in pop culture. Everybody knows about it, everybody is fond of it, for the most part. And so this was a very highly anticipated game. Up until now, Lego had made 7 games and 7 movies had been covered in that, but we hadn't got episode 8, 9, Rogue One, Solo, all of that stuff. And while this incorporates certain things from those other things I mentioned, like characters, this essentially covers the 9 movies of, as you guessed it, the Skywalker Saga. But 8 and 9 are done for the very first time in game form. And so, while the first 7 episodes are a lot like what you've played before, except there may be abridged versions of it or remastered to look a little more, modern and unique. This is essentially going to be a set piece for a lot of people to see what they've done with the newer movies. But before we get into all of that, I decided to just keep the normal background for this review. Normally I have the television screen and all that, but then I figured I got the posters right behind me. So it kind of makes sense to have, like this background going for a Star Wars review. I was excited for this game. I'm not gonna lie to you. For the last couple of years, every time it got delayed, my heart broke a little bit. I was waiting for this thing, and then I got it the day it dropped. I bought the deluxe edition, and I've been playing it, but I've been playing it in pauses. And so I'm going to start off with actually some of the negatives that I have with this game. I thought let's get that out of the way. Sometimes the pacing of this game can be really, really bad. It can go from being a game that's incredibly short and just skims over a lot of different events to something that is tediously stretched out to the point that you don't want to play for long periods of time. And sometimes that can feel a little bit frustrating. Like you want to play this, but sometimes that it just feels like it can't figure out whether it wants to be really, really short and get you to the next thing, or if it wants to really stretch it out, take its time, and make you do something. And so it can feel very conflicting, like those two things are clashing against one another. And speaking of the shortness of it, a lot of this game is really reliant on you being a massive Star Wars fan, which makes sense, but what I necessarily mean by that is like, if you're expecting full stories to be told, you're of course not. It's an everyone 10 plus game. It's going to be mainly restricted to the stuff that you can do action-wise, and since there's a lot of that, the movies are focusing, the ones that they're showing in the games, those are the things that they're focusing on. Like, you're not gonna get trade disputes with Viceroy Gunray in episode 1. That's not gonna happen. But if you were looking for something a little more in-depth like that, then I'm sorry to say that's not what's happening over here. But it also means skimming over some other scenes. They don't necessarily have to be trade dispute things or something serious for mature audiences or something like that. It's just simple things that seem to have been really quickly skimmed over. Action sequences that you just don't get to play out because they didn't get the time to do that. And that unfortunately also comes under the crunch part. Apparently the developers, they really had a hard time working with this game. And I think you can kind of tell during this game that there was some crunch involved because you're playing some of it and it still feels like they're working on it. Like there's going to be some development done to it in the days to come. I'm not surprised about that because when we started playing it, there were a few little glitches here and there. I thought, they'll probably be fixed. And they were eventually fixed, but it does feel like this thing still needed a few more months to marinate. It's a massive game. Honestly, this thing, if you really spread this thing out, it's honestly got hundreds of hours, at least 100 hours worth of content in it. You can spend a long time playing this thing. And that comes into actually my positives. There's a lot to do in this game. Yes, it could be paced a lot better, but the content that this offers to you, despite the shortened runtimes of certain things or the longevity of others, that still manages to give you quite a bit to do, and it gives you some beautiful visuals to go with it. Every single chapter looks stunning. Some of the lightsaber battles are genuinely really great. As the games progress and you get to the later chapters, you can see an evolution. Like 8 and 9, Last Jedi and Rise of Skywalker, you can clearly tell they put a lot of effort into those two because those are the two they're doing for the very first time. And so you want to make that impression. And throughout those 2 chapters, there is a bit of an evolution in terms of the quality that you're seeing. And so I do have to give some praise to that. However, sometimes when you're playing the other stuff, it feels like they've taken a step back from it because they've done it before. And so it can feel like, again, like a tug of war situation. I've already played 7 on the official 7 game. They actually made a separate one when that movie came out. And so I know for a fact that there's a lot more in there that they have shortened quite a bit to fit this particular this game. But let's get all of that out of the way. Let's just focus on the game itself, the one that we get. Is it good? Is it still good enough and worth buying? Yes, for the most part. I would say if you're a massive Star Wars fan, you already bought this game. This was definitely a day one purchase for you. And because it already has such an inbuilt fan base, you went to get it. The PS5 controlling, which is what I played it on, is pretty solid. There's definitely some things that are left to be desired, but eventually as it progressed, like I said, the controls got a lot smoother. There were times where it felt a little stiff, but the lightsaber combat improved drastically again as the episodes went on. And sometimes the vibrations were also a little jarring, like you didn't need it for everything. But nonetheless, it was still very smooth handling. Like, there was never any issue with it. Honestly, the ship handling was the best. Just every time you were just flying around in space, getting into these space battles from time to time, that's when you really got to see some really good use of the maneuverability, and it's good in terms of like control. So definitely worth that. Sometimes the AI in the game can be a little on and off. Sometimes it's okay, it works totally great, and then other times it's very annoying. And I don't know, it does kind of take away from certain things at times. And since you are so in line with the AI of this for major chunks of the game, I think that could have been a lot better. I know this review is coming off more negative than I intended it to, but make no mistake, I overall like the game. I think there's a lot to like in it. I think it could have been a much better game though. And that's essentially where I am. It's good, but it could have been a lot better. Now, granted, maybe they're going to make it better as the days progress. Maybe there's a chance there's going to be somewhat of a Battlefront 2 level thing, but Battlefront 2, essentially they added in content over time and it became that redemption story that a lot of people have looked back on. There's a likely scenario that can happen here too, but for the most part, up until now, I can't say anything way too negative about the LEGO Skywalker Saga. I think the character stuff that they've done is great. The added humor they've put into certain things is a lot nicer. There's a few things that I think people were not big fans of in like the movies in terms of story development. But playing through all 9 movies, I will say one thing I liked about it is that I could see a more through line, like a better through line of how each thing led into the next. It doesn't feel scattered anymore, especially when it comes towards the latter bits of the entire saga. And even those, they seem to have done a few things like self-aware, try to make fun of it in order to make it a little more comprehensible in terms of like that linear story. Now, granted, this is a Lego game. It doesn't improve the movie for you in any way. If you didn't like 8 or 9, or if you liked 8 and didn't like 9, or if vice versa, that's not going to change because you played a Lego game for a few hours. But it adds a level of character to it that I think you guys might like, so I guess there is that to it. Personally, I loved 8. I thought 9 was fine, but 9 did do some things which I think it gets some flack for, and they've tweaked on it and they've improved it a little, which I thought was really nice. Like, there's one thing which they did, and I was surprised at how much it's not being talked about. Ben Solo talks during the last act of the game. This is something that is not in the movie, and a lot of people called it out. Like, he doesn't have any dialogue. And granted, Adam Driver in the movie is very good, and he can portray a lot of different emotions without saying a word. That just speaks to his abilities as an actor. But in this, there's actually some lines. So credit where credit's due. They do that. There's also some nice humor they've done with all the characters, and that includes Anakin to Luke to Rey. They do a great job with those. Changing around with the mods every now and then, changing them up with like different characters while you're playing them was fun. Like at one time I was playing Darth Vader in a Christmas sweater. That was great. And I'm playing against Darth Vader. Makes no sense, but okay. But Lego is great that way. You can just do all of those things. It's very imaginative. And you can tell there is a level of imagination to this. It's just that sometimes I feel like this game should have been in the oven a little while longer. But unfortunately, they'd already delayed it so much that at this point in time, crunch was the only thing they had in mind. I just hate the fact that it had to happen. And the worst part is sometimes you can tell, like I said, you can see that they were under an immense time limit. Like, you have to do this now or it's over. And that kind of sucks. But still, overall, I'm excited to see what comes with developments over time, because I'm sure they're going to improve this game in some way or the other. They're going to add stuff, I'm sure, and they're going to make certain tweaks here and there. And when that happens, I'm interested in going back to it. Like I said, there's a lot they can do with this game. There is so much potential in here that is yet to be tapped into, and I'm excited for what that's going to be. I'm going to give LEGO Star Wars The Skywalker Saga a 7 out of 10. This had all the makings to be the best LEGO game ever made. And again, hopefully it becomes that. But for now, it's fine. It's decent. Would you go out and buy this for $60 or $59.99, whatever it is? Like, would you? I don't know. I leave that to you. But like I said, if you were a Star Wars fan, you bought this a month ago. So what I'm saying over here about whether or not you should get it doesn't really matter. Guys, thank you very much for watching. Look forward to more reviews very soon. As always, if you like this, please do subscribe, and happy gaming.